Russian intelligence is everywhere. I mean, and its propaganda is everywhere, not only in Estonia, but it's all over the world. So it's not a question of Estonia, it's everywhere.
What's the Estonian position about shooting down drones, Russian drones, that enter NATO countries?
We are in a very simple position. That means we should lift the restrictions from use of weapons what Ukraine gets from Western world. That means we are able to target these drones where they start. That means on the Russian territory. And when this happens, the drones never reach to Ukraine, they don't reach to Latvia or any other country.
Do you think because NATO countries still don't down those drones, that Russia thinks that NATO is not serious in its intention?
I don't think so, because first of all, we have to know whether it's by accident or it's deliberate. And of course, Latvia and Estonia, we rely on NATO. That means we have to start discussions how to behave in these kind of situations, and these discussions have started already.
Do you think that Estonia is protected enough of being a member of NATO if President Donald Trump enters back into the White House?
I mean, Donald Trump has been a president already. So, and we have been, at the time, NATO member of ally. But it's not only, don't rely only on NATO allies, but we also spend quite a number of our own resources on defense. And at this very moment, next year, it's above 3%. And what we should do, and we do, is to convince also other NATO member countries to put also more than 2% on defense.
Do you believe that in the West, and especially in the United States, most politicians and both presidential candidates want Ukraine actually to win this war?
We want to defeat Russia, that's for sure. And you have to understand there are presidential elections in US. That means there is a debate going on in different issues. And it's a different situation when one becomes a president. So let's wait. It's American people's decision who is going to be a president of the United States. But for us, it's very important that we keep this transatlantic bond, and that as far as defense is concerned in the world, US should be number one in this case.
Do you think that Estonia and your neighboring countries are now well equipped to hold on the Russian army in case it wants to invade?
Of course we are, and as I said, it's not only us, but also our allies. But the doctrine is, in a way, what should we do? We are a small country. That means we have to make sure that enemy does not enter our territory. That's simple as that.
There's been recently an uptick in Estonian activity internationally. Your former prime minister will be the foreign minister of the European Union. Do you feel that now, finally, after years of war in Ukraine, Western capitals are hearing the eastern flank of NATO and the European Union more?
I guess so, because I guess our Western allies, which are much further away from Russian border, they started to understand what this war in Ukraine means, not only for Ukraine, but also for them. So because it's not only us who are next to Russia, it's Europe and it's NATO countries. So I think our partners have realized that that's the situation. And they started to, first of all, to assist and to help Ukraine, and also to think about their own defense.
Do you think that if before the start of the full-scale war, Washington, London, Berlin would listen more to Tallinn or Warsaw, then the situation would be different?
Well, definitely it would have been different, but we don't know what kind of difference. But because these countries, and we as well, we used this peaceful life. I mean, no war, nothing, and we were pretty much naive, but we did wake up earlier than, let's say, our friends in further away. So, but I guess now it's a different situation. But How would have it happened if, I don't know.
Can we talk about the Russian activity currently in Baltic states? There's always been a large Russian-speaking population. Do you see an increase in Russian intelligence activity or Russian psyops in Estonia?
Russian intelligence is everywhere. I mean, and its propaganda is everywhere, not only in Estonia, but it's all over the world. You see, even United States in the elections, and not only Europe. So we have to be ready for that. And also now, whereas misinformation which is spread by Russia, cyber attacks, and so forth. So it's not a question of Estonia. It's everywhere, and we have to prepare for this, and we are prepared, let's say, for cyber attacks already for quite a long time, because it started in 2007, and we started to convince also our Western partners that this is a very important issue.
You mentioned in the beginning of our interview that Ukraine needs to be allowed to strike Russian targets in Russia. Do you actually know why it's taking so long for many countries to allow this?
One thing probably is that some countries, some leaders are afraid of escalation. But there is no escalation anymore, because escalation is there. I mean, Russia has crossed all the red lines already, so there is no point to be afraid of escalation. And these restrictions are just pointless.
Do you think that having those restrictions, and Ukrainians and also Ukrainian close allies like Estonia asking Western capitals to provide first tanks, then artillery, then missiles, and so on, and planes, do you think that there was a lot of time wasted and the war could be drastically different if all of this would be allowed, say, a year or two ago?
Probably, but the thing is, every country has a different history, different political parties, different ideas. That means it does take time. We are not countries with dictators. So that means it's a democratic country. That means you have to also convince your people, not only politicians. And unfortunately, it does take more time. And of course, we also hoped that, let's say, this one step does help. It didn't. Next didn't either. So now we probably realized that we have to cross all these red lines and then start forcing Russia out of Ukraine.
Do you think that it's still a relevant possibility that Russia will use nuclear weapons, or the European allies and the United States should stop worrying about Russian nuclear saber rattling?
I guess Russia knows very well, but Russia is not the only nuclear power in Europe and in the world. So I don't think we are going to test nuclear attack to any country.
Estonia has been doing a lot for Ukraine since day one. Can you please explain why, from the first day of the full-scale invasion, Estonia was one of the countries that provided the most both military help, humanitarian help to Ukraine, and why, despite years of war, Estonia continues to do it?
Because we have our own history, and we know what occupation means. That means when Russia or Soviet Union did occupy our country. So, and not only all Baltic states and all Poland and so forth. So we have this kind of memory, and our parents have this kind of memory. So that's one reason. And as a small independent country, we can't afford that these powerful countries will cross the border of a independent country. So, and we will continue to support Ukraine, of course.
Do you feel that as long as this war continues, more voices in the West will try to persuade Ukraine to find a solution to the war that doesn't involve deoccupying all of its territory?
Because these peace talks, I mean, at this very moment, we can't afford these quick peace talks, because it's Putin already said what he wants. He wanted to NATO back to 1997, and he wants to have Donbass and other regions and so forth. So that means, as I said, we should push Russia back to its territory and make Russia convince also Russia that this war was useless. And then we can sit behind the table and start talking. And we have a peace plan. It's a peace formula that Zelensky provided. So it's only a peace plan at this very moment.
And my last question is, do you think that NATO countries and NATO as a whole is doing enough to help Ukraine win?
There's never enough. So we could do more. We could do much more. So I also here in Kyiv, I mentioned that we should do more. And not only Estonia, other states, but we all states who are on the side of democracy, we should do much more.